The weather's closing in on us here. It's been snowing a little bit. It's been cold. You know, it's that end of season push. And everybody's doing a really good job.
For over a century, one place in the Klondike has been whispered about in fear. The Widow's Cut, a frozen tomb where fortunes are lost and legends are born. Every miner who dared enter either walked away empty-handed or never walked out at all. But in 2025, Parker Schnabel is about to attempt the impossible, armed with a secret weapon the old-timers never imagined. What he finds beneath the permafrost could rewrite Gold Rush history forever. Stay with us as we dive deep into Parker's most dangerous gamble. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the treasure that's about to surface. They said no man could ever conquer the Widow's Cut. A century ago, a desperate crew dug deep into this frozen nightmare, chasing whispers of a gold vein so pure it could rewrite fortunes overnight. But the ground betrayed them. The shaft collapsed in an instant, sealing men and machines beneath tons of ice and rock. Their screams echoed through the Klondike for days, and then silence. No bodies were ever recovered. Since then, the Widow's Cut became legend, a place cursed by miners, feared by prospectors, and avoided by anyone who valued their life. Stories of shattered equipment, ruined fortunes, and fatal accidents spread through every campfire in Dawson City. Few dared even speak its name. But Parker Schnabel isn't like most miners. Where others saw a death trap, Parker saw destiny. He'd grown up chasing bigger goals than anyone thought possible, learning at the side of his legendary grandfather, John Schnabel. And now, staring at the Widow's Cut, Parker saw what nobody else did: opportunity. Armed with cutting-edge technology, Parker brought tools the old-timers could never have imagined: drones and high-powered LiDAR lasers. With them, his crew scanned through ice and earth, building a perfect map of the land that had swallowed so many before. What they found was staggering: a hidden shaft, man-made, plunging straight down into the heart of the permafrost. It was the breakthrough miners had chased for over a century. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became, because beneath that gold was something even deadlier: a geological death trap waiting to awaken. I expect a bit of calibration problems on this ground, like our process and figuring out the most efficient way of doing things, right? I expect those problems. Parker's voice echoed against the frozen walls of the cut, half pep talk, half challenge to himself. His crew listened quietly, knowing full well that this wasn't just another hole in the ground. This was the Widow's Cut. While rivals like Tony Beats leaned on decades of hard-earned wisdom, Parker mixed old-school grit with relentless youthful ambition. He wasn't content to just survive the season. He wanted more: 7,000 ounces of gold more. That number wasn't random. It was the kind of haul that would silence every critic, crown him as the undisputed king of the Klondike, and put his name in the history books beside the greatest miners of all time. Most miners looked at the Widow's Cut and saw certain death. Parker saw an invitation. He figured if no one else dared to tackle it, whatever treasure lay hidden, there was his alone to claim. But the gamble was massive. He was betting his entire season, his crew's safety, and millions in equipment on a shaft that had already killed men 100 years ago. Instead of brute-forcing his way through the permafrost with bulldozers and excavators like the old-timers, Parker went to war with something they never could have imagined: high-tech eyes in the sky. "Fire it up," Parker ordered, nodding to his drone operator. Within seconds, advanced drones buzzed overhead, sweeping the frozen wasteland with laser precision. their secret weapon. LiDAR, light detection, and ranging. Unlike standard mapping, LiDAR pierced through trees, brush, and even layers of snow, firing millions of pulses into the ground to create a 3D model accurate down to the centimeter. On the monitors inside Parker's command trailer, the Widow's Cut transformed from a tangled mess of ice and rock into a crystal-clear map of hidden shafts, collapsed tunnels, and long-forgotten pathways carved by miners generations ago. "Look at this," Parker whispered, pointing at the screen. "That's not natural. That's man-made." The team stared in stunned silence. Buried beneath a century of permafrost was a perfectly straight vertical shaft, 40 meters deep, plunging straight into darkness. It was the forgotten entrance the legends had whispered about. The map didn't lie. Someone had been here before, and they left something behind. This was the breakthrough Parker had been praying for, a shortcut into the Widow's Cut without having to carve an entirely new tunnel. But shortcuts in the Klondike come at a price. The walls of the old shaft were unstable, brittle from decades of freezing and thawing. One wrong move could bring the entire hillside crashing down on their heads. Still, Parker's eyes burned with determination. "If there's gold down there, we're taking it," he said, voice low but certain. The crew got to work, hauling in massive steel beams, lowering them carefully into the shaft to brace the walls. Each clang of metal against frozen rock echoed like a warning. One misstep, one fracture, and tons of ice and stone would bury them alive. For days they worked without rest, battling collapsing walls, sub-zero temperatures, and the constant threat of floodwater seeping up from the thawing ground. And then, just when frustration threatened to break them, the LiDAR readings lit up again. Hidden even deeper than they'd imagined, the lasers revealed something extraordinary. A second chamber, sealed, untouched, and shimmering with promise. Word of Parker Schnabel's unbelievable strike at the Widow's Cut spread faster than wildfire. In the saloons of Dawson City, whispers turned to shouts. Every rival miner, every local prospector, every government inspector suddenly had Parker's name on their lips. The quiet young miner who once fought to prove himself was now being called the man who might have just pulled off the biggest gold discovery of the century. But for Parker, the celebrations never came. Because the deeper his crew dug, the more dangerous the Widow's Cut became, and the more secrets it revealed. The breakthrough came late one night, when Parker's geologists studied the latest LiDAR scans. The first gold chamber had already made headlines, but the new data hinted at something even more astonishing. Another void hidden beneath the first, larger and perfectly straight, cutting through the permafrost like a man-made tunnel. This wasn't nature's work. Someone had dug this, long before Parker ever set foot on this ground. The discovery changed everything. This wasn't just about gold anymore. It was about history, mystery, and a forgotten story buried for more than 100 years. As Parker's crew reinforced the shaft, each hammer strike echoed like thunder in the frozen dark. Massive steel beams, hauled in at enormous cost, were lowered carefully into the collapsing mine walls. It was nerve-wracking work. Every groan of shifting ice sent shivers down their spines. Parker knew one wrong move could bury them alive. And yet, they pushed forward, because down in that frozen silence, the promise of unimaginable wealth and something far older kept them digging. But news travels fast in the Klondike. Within days, Parker's fiercest rival, Tony Beats, had heard the rumors. For decades, Tony ruled this land the old-fashioned way, with brute force and unshakable grit. Watching Parker swoop in with lasers, drones, and futuristic mapping technology lit a fire in him. He dismissed Parker's methods in public, calling them toys, but behind closed doors, Tony's crew began circling the claim, filing quiet legal challenges and spreading rumors designed to destabilize Parker's operation. A war was brewing, not just for gold, but for the title of King of the Klondike. Inside Parker's own camp, gold fever began to take hold. The $10 million cleanup they'd just pulled off should have united the crew, but instead, it drove wedges between them. Old friendships frayed as men argued over bonuses, work hours, and safety risks. The endless 18-hour days and bone-freezing nights pushed everyone to the brink. Parker, once the first to grab a shovel and lead by example, now found himself buried in legal paperwork and sleepless strategy meetings, fighting to hold the entire operation together as it threatened to unravel from within. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Deep at the bottom of the reinforced shaft, one of Parker's men struck something unexpected. Timber. Not fractured rock or frozen gravel, but perfectly preserved wooden supports, hand-cut and charred by lantern fire from another age. Clearing the debris revealed a sealed chamber, untouched since the late 1800s. Inside, gold dust glittered faintly in the dim light. But it wasn't just the gold that left the crew speechless. Scattered across the chamber were rusting tools, scraps of clothing, and hand-carved initials, evidence of miners who had come before and never returned. Parker stood in the mouth of that chamber, helmet light dancing across the relics of a bygone era. The realization hit him like a wave. They weren't the first to find this place. They were simply the first to survive it, for now. Because just as the crew prepared to celebrate their second mother lode, the ground trembled violently. Ice cracked above them like distant gunfire. A low, bone-deep rumble echoed through the shaft, and in that instant, every man understood. The widow's cut wasn't done claiming lives. The gold they had uncovered was priceless, but what lay deeper was far more dangerous. Something hidden, something man-made, and something deliberately buried was waiting below. And the deeper they went, the closer they came to a mystery that could rewrite the history of the Klondike forever. The gamble had paid off big time, but this incredible score, a jaw-dropping $10 million haul, was only the beginning. Beneath their boots, hidden in the frozen depths of the widow's cut, lay a secret so vast it defied belief, a $75 million jackpot buried under miles of unbroken quartz-rich earth. For Parker Schnabel and his crew, the discovery was more than just a financial windfall. It was the validation of everything Parker had sacrificed. Years of brutal winters, sleepless nights, endless setbacks, and a relentless drive to prove himself worthy of the Schnabel name. But as the geologists examined the deposit more closely, an even more staggering truth came to light. The quartz vein wasn't just rich, it was massive. Early scans suggested it stretched more than 2 kilometers underground, a glittering river of gold running through frozen bedrock like lightning trapped in stone. No one in modern Klondike history had ever seen anything like it. And if Parker could extract it all, he wouldn't just set a new record. He'd make mining history. But in the Klondike, news like this never stays secret for long. Within hours, whispers of Parker's strike flooded Dawson City. Saloon talk turned into radio chi, and by morning, rival miners and even government inspectors were flocking to Widow's Cut, desperate to catch a glimpse of the discovery. The claim, once an abandoned death trap, was now the most valuable piece of land in the entire Yukon. Parker moved fast. Legal paperwork was filed, security was tightened, and his crew was sworn to secrecy. But the genie was out of the bottle. In a world where fortunes are won and lost overnight, Parker had just painted the biggest target imaginable on his back. And for the first time in his young career, Parker realized the real battle wasn't against frozen ground or failing equipment. It was against the people willing to take everything from him. The attack came quietly at first. A smear campaign lit up social media, accusing Parker of reckless mining practices and environmental destruction. Fake court documents surfaced online, alleging that he faced life in prison for crimes he didn't commit. Within days, a shadowy shell corporation, rumored to have ties to Parker's fiercest rivals, filed a lawsuit claiming ownership of Widow's Cut. They presented forged 19th-century deeds, maps, and signatures so convincing they sent Parker's lawyers scrambling. Parker had always settled disputes the old-fashioned way, with handshakes, hard work, or, when necessary, heated shouting matches across the claim line. But this was different. This was modern warfare, legal battles, viral rumors, and financial sabotage. For the first time, Parker found himself out of his depth. Meanwhile, the pressure on his crew was reaching a breaking point. What had started as a tight-knit team, driven by shared ambition, was now fracturing under the strain of fame and fortune. Arguments over bonuses turned into shouting matches. Long shifts and sleepless nights bred resentment and paranoia. And in the background, whispers of sabotage and spies leaking information to rival miners began to circulate. The stakes had never been higher. A $75 million fortune was within Parker's reach, but so were ruin and betrayal. And as winter crept closer, bringing with it the merciless deep freeze of the Yukon, Parker faced an impossible question. Could he hold his claim, his crew, and his sanity together long enough to secure the biggest jackpot in Gold Rush history? Or would the Widow's Cut become his undoing, just as it had for every miner who dared to touch it before? That's wild. There's a start. We're on the board, Mitch. Well, that's an awesome pan. For a fleeting moment, Parker allowed himself a smile. The gold was real, the vein was pure, and the numbers were staggering. But even as the yellow glint danced in the sluice, Parker couldn't shake the gnawing weight pressing down on him. Out there, beyond the roar of excavators and pumps, the sharks were circling. Tony Beets was the boldest of them all. A legend in his own right, Beets had survived every boom and bust the Klondike had thrown at him. And now, with Parker's fortune splashed across rumors and headlines, Tony smelled blood in the water. He played the part of a friendly rival in public, offering casual advice, smiling for the cameras. But behind the scenes, Parker knew Tony was fanning the flames. Every whisper, every lawsuit, every so-called anonymous leak seemed to trace back to him. The pressure was suffocating. At the start of the season, Parker's crew had been unstoppable. A tight-knit family bound by grit and ambition. Days were long, nights were cold, but morale was high. They shared jokes over frozen coffee, pushed through exhaustion, and dreamed of the big payday ahead. But success changes everything. The $10 million haul from the Widow's Cut, one of the richest strikes in modern Klondike history, should have united them. Instead, it tore them apart. Suddenly, loyalty gave way to greed. Friendships fractured under the weight of gold dust and dollar signs. Arguments erupted over bonuses. Demands for shorter shifts clashed with warnings about looming deadlines. Safety concerns turned into whispered accusations. Some feared the mine would collapse again. Others feared the crew itself was collapsing. Outside the claim, the chaos only deepened. A few workers, flush with sudden fame and cash, dove headfirst into Dawson City's nightlife. Bars, fast cars, and fistfights became their new normal. Local reporters pounced, turning Parker's disciplined operation into tabloid fodder. Headlines screamed of drunken brawls and reckless spending, the kind of press Parker had spent years avoiding. "Congratulations," someone muttered bitterly one night. "This is to those that help you get started, those that help you along the way, but aren't here to share. Let's pour that one out." The toast wasn't celebratory, it was resentful. Parker watched it all unravel with quiet horror. He had clawed his way to the top, earning respect in a brutal industry that ate men alive. Now, as the world finally called him a genius, he felt like a fraud. He was no longer leading from the driver's seat of a dozer. He was in an office, drowning in paperwork, lawyers, and endless problems. Every decision carried the weight of millions. Every glance from his crew felt like judgment. And worst of all, the real danger wasn't outside. It wasn't the lawsuits, the rival miners, or even the unstable ground beneath Widow's Cut. The real danger was inside Parker's own head. Months of relentless stress had cracked something deep within him. Doubt crept in where confidence once lived. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound, a whisper behind his back. He began second-guessing every move, wondering if this treasure was worth the cost. The Widow's Cut had given Parker Schnabel the richest gold strike of his life, and in doing so, it had turned him into a man besieged. The dream he had chased since boyhood now felt like a prison he couldn't escape. Deep down, Parker knew the harsh truth. Finding the treasure was the easy part. Keeping it, surviving it, that was the real battle. Would Parker hold on to his fortune, his crew, and his sanity, or would the Klondike's deadliest claim finally claim him too? By mid-season, the Widow's Cut had transformed from a treasure trove into a battlefield. The deeper Parker's crew dug, the more volatile the ground and the people became. What started as whispered doubts turned into outright sabotage. It began small, a hydraulic line mysteriously cut in the middle of the night, costing Parker 2 full days of production. A safety alarm disabled on an excavator, missing fuel drums. At first, Parker chalked it up to mistakes, bad luck, or simple exhaustion. But when the pattern continued, always targeting their most critical equipment, paranoia set in. He called a meeting under the floodlights, gold dust still clinging to everyone's boots. The crew stood in tense silence as Parker's voice cut through the roar of the generators. "Someone out here doesn't want us to finish this job," he said, his tone sharp, almost accusatory. "If you're tired, say it. If you're scared, say it. But if you're trying to shut us down, I will find out." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant howl of wind across the tundra. Parker scanned their faces, Mitch, Tyson, Rick, looking for guilt, for anger, for anything. But all he saw were tired eyes staring back. As the days dragged on, the accidents escalated. A loader nearly toppled into a newly exposed shaft when a guiding rope snapped. A pump mysteriously failed just as water levels began to rise, nearly flooding their work site. Someone or something was working against them. But Parker's problems didn't end there. While battling internal chaos, he received a call from his legal team that sent shivers down his spine. The lawsuit over the Widow's Cut had taken a darker turn. The rival corporation, challenging his claim, had unearthed something shocking. Original mining records from over a century ago. Records that hinted at an even deeper chamber beneath the Widow's Cut, sealed off after a catastrophic collapse in 1899. According to the faded maps, the chamber wasn't just rich in gold. It was rumored to contain artifacts hauled in by the first prospectors, items so valuable they'd been kept secret for generations. The miners who first dug the Widow's Cut had called it the King's Chamber. But why had it been sealed? And why had every attempt to reopen it ended in disaster? Parker couldn't ignore the pull. If this King's Chamber was real, it could dwarf even their $75 million haul, a discovery that would rewrite Klondike history. But every instinct screamed danger. As they drilled deeper, strange things started happening. The ground trembled more often, even on calm days. A constant hum echoed through the tunnels at night, a low vibration that unnerved even the toughest crewmen. Tools went missing, only to turn up bent or shattered. One night, a loader operator swore he heard voices in the shaft, faint, muffled cries from somewhere far below. Parker dismissed the talk as superstition, until they unearthed something no one could explain. In the muck, beneath layers of frozen gravel, the excavator bucket hit wood. At first, they thought it was just another rotten timber from the old mine. But as they dug it out, the truth emerged. A sealed wooden chest, bound in rusted iron, with strange markings scorched into the lid. The moment it was hoisted onto the surface, the wind howled through the valley like a warning. Even Parker, hardened by years of mining, felt a chill crawl up his spine. The chest was heavy, far heavier than it should have been. They pried it open under the floodlights. Inside, glinting faintly in the harsh white beams, were gold ingots and something else. Folded beneath the bars was a leather-bound journal, pages brittle with age but still legible. The first line made Parker's blood run cold. To whoever dares reopen this tomb, beware. The gold you seek is cursed by the blood we spilled to bury it.